Hey boys and girls, our book today is called Aani and the Tree Huggers. This is a really good book. I had never read it before we started making this video, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Aani set down the basket of brown nuts she'd been gathering and set beneath her favorite tree. Every day, at least once, she leaned gratefully against its thick, rough trunk. Here, she had daydreams too large to fit in her family's crowded hut, where crying babies, her grandfather's complaints, and her sister's gossip drowned out the sounds of her own thinking. Aani crushed a red berry to make a red spot on her forehead like her mother's. She was weaving grass around her ankle like the silver bracelets married women wore when she heard rumbling and roaring. The sound was as angry as a tiger's growl. It was louder than the thunder that seemed like the stormy voice of the snow-capped mountains. Aani glanced at the Himalayas, but the noise was not coming from the snowy home of the spirits. As the grinding and gnashing grew louder, Aani sprang up. She knocked over her basket of nuts as she ran toward home. Her mother was not in their hut or in the yard. Her father and the other men were in the distant field cutting stalks of rice. Aani ran to the river and found her mother filling a jug with water. "Mother, can you hear the noise?" Aani cried. Her mother put down the jug and listened. A woman beside her stopped whisking the sari she was washing through the water. Several women, some with babies bouncing on their backs, rushed toward them. Aani's mother looked past the smoke that curled between the tree trunks. "It's a truck," she told Aani. "A gigantic and swift cart." The other women had reached them. It is as we heard from the forest runners," Kalawati said. Everyone turned to listen respectfully, since Kalawati was the oldest person in the village. "The men from the city have come to take the woods." Aani's mother frowned. "But the forest has always been here. Our people have always been here." "The men from the city will say that we don't own it. We don't have papers," Kalawati said. "That's what they told them in the other village." The rumbling had stopped. Aani lifted the hem of her sari and ran toward the place that had just turned silent. She sped past the rice fields where the men carried sheaves of rice on their back like golden capes. Aani's mother and the other women dropped their baskets and pots and hurried behind her. The silver bracelets on their wrists and ankles jangled. They stopped when they saw the truck. Several men swung axes. One held a tool with jagged and sharp steel teeth. "Namaste," Aani and the women put their hands together prayer-like and bowed their heads. The men continued to swing their silver axes at the bottoms of the small trees. The metal first broke the bark. The gashes grew wider. One man pushed a broken tree. It thudded to the ground, and Aani's mother covered her mouth. "Stop!" Kalawati cried. A man pulled the chain of a saw. The grinding noise was shrill, but Kalawati spoke loudly. The trees give us their fruit and berries. Their wood provides our houses and our plows and hoes. The roots keep the land from sliding when the heavy winds and rain come off the mountain." The men continued to swing axes. The swaying and buckling branches let Aani see the wind, and the wind let her see spirits. A man with an axe seemed only to touch a tree, and it crashed down. Kalawati ran toward this man. "Kalawati, stop!" the woman cried. Kalawati grabbed for the man's axe. The man pushed Kalawati, and she tumbled. "Get out of the way!" yelled the man. "We use these branches for our fires," Kalawati said. "We need them to cook our food and warm our homes." Another man waved a piece of paper. "We've got orders." "Already you've cut more than we cut in a year," Kalawati said. "Animals live among these trees. Where can they go?" Another man with an axe brushed past Kalawati. He walked by Aani's baskets and nuts close to the tree that Aani sat beneath every day. Aani ran toward him. "Come back," her mother called. Aani threw her arms around the tree. She pressed herself against it. The man and his axe were at her back. How easily that axe had pierced the bark. "Aani!" her mother screamed. Aani heard her fear, but she pressed herself closer to the tree, close so that nothing came between them. The bark scraped her cheek. She didn't look until the sound of the saws and the swinging axes stopped. The wind wound around the trees so that the leaves softly wooed and hummed. And then she saw that around her, women and children were hugging trees. The red tikas on the women's foreheads made bright spots in the forest. The men had put down their axes and were whispering. Then one of them said, "Please go home." "This is our home," said Kalawati. "We will give you 1,000 rupees just to leave," he replied. Rupees are their money. Aani thought about what 1,000 rupees might buy. A goat, so they wouldn't have to carry kindling on their backs. It could buy new seats for cutting rice, and enough tea and sugar to last everyone for years. "No," Kalawati said. "We don't need 1,000 rupees. We need the trees." Once again, Aani and the women clasped their arms around the trees. Aani didn't move until she heard the rumble of the trucks, first loud, then fainter. Rustling leaves and rattling branches again filled the forest with their music. Aani dropped her arms from the tree. Namaste. Peace was what they wished for, everyone who came and left. "What did you think you were doing?" Aani's mother asked. "I was so afraid." "I was afraid too," Aani said. Kalawati started dancing. Another woman bounced her baby. Overhead, birds flew from tree to tree. Some began to chant. Aani looked up at the great range of mountains and whispered a prayer to the goddess mother of the world. The trees were safe now. Everyone was safe. The end. I hope you liked our story, Aani and the Tree Huggers. I want you to think about how Aani helped her village, helped her community. Think about ways you can help your community too.